Hi, I hope you're well. For those who don't know me, it's Ben from My Cycling Coach, where we've now helped over 500 cyclists achieve 3 watts per kilo and beyond with their power, fitness, weight. I make these videos, been doing this for the past 10 plus years. The science, the practical application, both my own training, but what we've implemented with those hundreds of clients, as I mentioned, that we've helped. If I can fast track you to your goals without having to take 10 plus years to get there, then I've done my job with making these videos. So this week's topic, this is for you if you are coming to maybe you're training a little bit late now into the springtime. You maybe haven't trained much at all through the winter for various reasons, just because, other commitments, might be in family, might be in work, might just the motivation just hasn't been there to really do any training or get any structure to training. And you're now coming to your riding a little bit late, and you may already have some things in the diary, early sort of spring, summer that you're looking to target, whether that be trips, events, sportives, Gran Fondos, the club time trials, or it may even be that you just want to start doing some group riding and you want to be able to actually keep up on those group rides, or even you may just be somebody who rides by yourself and you're finding, just haven't done as much riding as you'd like through the winter. You really want to kickstart your fitness and get in shape now so that you can have a great summer on the bike. So today I'm going to go through a real sort of fast track you into some real good fitness and shape by the time early summer comes around, to really get you to where you want to be able to do so. And really going to break it down into 3 steps. This structure that I've got here behind me, loving using the whiteboard at the moment, just helps me, I think, as I'm going through, explain things, but hopefully it's good for you just as a bit of a visual aid as well. So we're going to break it down into 3 steps today. And if you follow these 3 steps, we're really going to fast track your power and fitness over the coming weeks now. I'm aiming for sort of an 8-week block that we're going to go through here through using these 3 steps. So the first step that we're going to get straight into it, we're going to go for some testing. Okay, so it's really important. I've discussed this before. If you follow me a little bit on the channel, whenever, starting training, getting back into riding, certainly after a period of time off, whether that's been just because you haven't been able to ride or train, like I say, you haven't had the time, or you may have had injury or illness, is also where we can see this, is absolutely crucial that we perform some testing. And the reason for this is we really want to establish a new baseline. And from that baseline, whether it be, I'm going to use power zones in this example today that I'm going to run through with you, but it's really so we can establish for cyclists really that good standard in the field, practical application wise, is that FTP, your functional threshold power. And from that, we can then establish training zones based off of that FTP, but ensure it's accurate to actually where you are right now and where you're starting from. A big mistake I can see riders doing, they have basing their training, at the start of the spring off an FTP that they had at the end of last summer. And generally, if you're going to see where you're fittest through the year, it's probably at the end of the summer where you've done the most riding through the summer, whether that's been structured or unstructured. You're generally going to probably be at your fittest. May have then had the whole winter off or done very little riding or training through the winter, and then they will take that FTP from last year and try to start training out of that again. And the problem with this is when we're looking at training zones, you're actually really not training within the accurate zones. If you've been following me again, I speak a lot about zone 2, improving your threshold, your VO2 max. But those aerobic, anaerobic energy systems, if we don't have our zones set to where we need them to be, then when you're actually doing a ride, you might be training in a completely wrong zone, too hard or too easy, or not finding that sweet spot and actually not maximizing what you're getting from your training. So absolutely crucial, initially performing some testing. Now there's 2 types of tests that you can use to establish your FTP. There's lots of platforms out there that will help you do this, whether it's Swift, whether it's Trainer Road, Ruvi, Be Cool. You may just have with your Garmin, your Wahoo systems. A lot of those apps now have actually FTP protocols that you can go and perform. And I'm not going to go into really detail today. I've done a video on this before on which protocol is the best one. But the 2 most common ones out there are the 20-minute sustained effort, or we have the ramp test. And you may have heard of these 2 before. Okay, so 20-minute effort is literally where you will do 20-minute or so warm up, may have some efforts in there to prepare that little bit of anaerobic blowout before you actually get to the 20-minute effort. And then you will do a 20-minute all-out effort. And from that 20 minutes, we will take the average power output and we will multiply it by 0.95. And this then gives us that FTP of where we want you to be with it to set and base your training zones off of. Now, the other protocol is the ramp test. And this is where you will literally do a ramped test through a lot of, as I say, the online protocols and platforms and apps. They have this. Again, you will start with a 20 to 30 minute warm up, and then depending on the protocol you perform, it will probably be anything from 1 to 3 minutes. The protocol will increase the power output until you can sustain the most common one, most popular one with the online platforms is every 1 minute. So you will see every 1 minute, you will see an increment in power. And then the final minute that you complete, the power output, the average power that you sustain during that minute, we then multiply that generally, depending on the protocol, as I say, by 0.75. And this again will then give us your FTP. Now, as I say, I'm not going to go into massive detail in terms of which one is the most beneficial, okay? If you have been doing a little bit of training and riding, and you've done a few little efforts where you started to get back some riding, then this one may be the more accurate one for you to do. It's a little bit harder to perform, a little bit harder to pace, but it is very accurate of what I found in the field, establishing where your FTP, anaerobic threshold lies, if you like. Yeah. If you haven't done any training whatsoever, any riding at all, then in terms of practically performing the test, the ramp test is easier to perform. Now, I say not easier, you're going to be pushing yourself to obviously maximal exertion on the test. However, just in terms of pacing, being able to follow those 1 minute increments, if you haven't been doing much riding, the ramp test is probably your one to go with, just in terms of performing it. You'll be able to get some good accurate numbers there. Okay, so choose which method you're going to perform there. Establish those baseline numbers, and then once you've done that, we can use the training zones. I tend to like to use the classic model of the training zones 1 to 6. So zone 1, recovery; zone 2, endurance; zone 3, tempo; zone 4 is your threshold; zone 5, VO2 max; zone 6 is like anaerobic neuromuscular type efforts. And from there, again, if you're using a platform, Strava will give you these zones. I've done a video actually on this as well a few weeks back or earlier this year on just where to find those training zones in Strava. So if you missed that one, go back and watch that, as it really allows you to also then track where they are as well. Okay. If you're using something like Training Peaks, or you've got access to Swift and some of those other apps as well, you can put your FTP in and it will give you where all of your zones are. But generally, if you're watching this video, I imagine that you have Strava. You can do that, put your FTP on Strava, and it'll give you where all of your zones are there. But the most important thing is we've done that test. We've established where our FTP is, where we're actually starting from, whether that's higher, or maybe in which case, if you're watching this and you haven't done much training, much lower than where you were last year, doesn't matter. Most important thing is that we have that baseline that we can then actually really build from. Okay. Coming into step 2 then, optimize. So now we have this data, we've established where that is, we want to optimize that. But the reason I call this optimize is we're really looking to make gains as quick as possible now, certainly with your aerobic capacity, your VO2 max, and your threshold. And if you've watched some of my previous videos, I've actually shown you how you can put some of these sessions together without having to go and pay or buy an online app or a training program, and you can just put some sessions together through doing so. But what we really want to do here is just start to optimize your time. Okay, so to do so, just looking at a week, I would like you to perform at least ×1 VO2 max training session. Okay, now again, I'm not going to go into what a VO2 max training session, the exact ins and outs of it today, because I've already done that. I think it was only a couple of weeks back. And you can go back, I think it says, structuring training, structuring your week, performing sessions, may have even been in the last video. I give you exact durations of how long the VO2 max interval should be and exactly the intensity you should be targeting of your FTP to do so. But when we're optimizing our week now, we want to get going. We really want to start getting some good quality interval training in. Please perform ×1 VO2 max training session every single week now, going forward for the time being. The second session is I'd like you to perform ×1 threshold session. Okay? And again, in previous videos, I've shown you how to do this, how you can actually structure it. I've also done a video on this as well, but you may find that, at the start of the week, let's just say on a Tuesday, you may have your VO2 max training session. On a Wednesday or a Thursday, you may have an easier ride when we get onto zone 2 in a minute. This is the other sessions that I want you to perform. And then, later on in the week, you may perform one of your threshold sessions. The idea of these sessions is they're going to be your 2 most intense sessions of the week, so we want to be going into them as fresh as possible. So you'll either have a rest day before, or you'll have an easy, recovery ride, or it might even be one of the other 2 sessions that I'd like you to do, at least 2 45 to 60 minute zone 2 rides. Okay? This is Min's. 45 to 60 minute rides around this. So we're looking at 4 rides a week. So the VO2 max session, warm up, main sets, cool down is probably going to take you around an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, but you can get a good VO2 max session in an hour, no problem. 4 × 4 minute protocol that I spoke about in my longevity video on the last video will give you the exact one for that. Threshold, again, 1 hour. So we're looking at we're looking at an hour here, we're looking at an hour here, and then we've obviously got 2 45 to 60 minute zone 2 rides where you're targeting 70%. I also said this in my longevity video, 70% of your, sorry, made a mess there, 70% of your FTP. For these zone 2 sessions is what I want you to target. 70% of your FTP is what I want you to target during these 45 to 60 minute sessions. So really, when we look at it, if you're doing, let's just call it 4 hours a week to get you going, which really, over a 7-day period, even if you're really busy, got family, got work, you should somehow be able to intertwine this in. You might have to get up a little bit earlier. You might have to train, before everybody gets up. But doing 60 minutes there is okay. You might have to do it in your lunch break. You might have to do it later into the evening. But 60 minutes through these sessions 4 times a week should be possible. And as I say, you're going to see fantastic gains from doing this. I promise you, I guarantee you. If you haven't already been doing this and you follow these steps, you are going to be in fantastic shape by the time you get to late spring, early summer. Okay? Now, just in terms of structuring how I would do this, okay, we're looking at an 8-week period here. Okay, so we're going to move into the build, step 3, which is the build phase. Okay, but let's just say we're looking at 8 weeks. This here, I would perform initially for 4 weeks. Okay, you may do 3 weeks really trying to target this, and if you wanted to, you could have a recovery week, but let's just say we're going to go through. The volume isn't huge. If you're doing 4 hours a week, then you probably actually don't really need a recovery week because the volume is quite low. We're just focusing on the intensity and the key zone 2 rides, okay? So for the first 4 weeks now, from now, let's say you're going to start this, I don't know, on Monday or this weekend, if you like, you're going to perform this structure here, okay? We then go into the build phase, which is we've established a really good base here through the zone 2 training. You're going to be improving your aerobic capacity, improving that mitochondrial density, just really bringing up your fitness, helping your recovery, your heart rate recovery. Everything is just going to get a lot more efficient. Threshold as well for climbing, VO2 max just generally for that longevity, but also helping you bring that top end power in as well, okay? You can then, so this is the first 4 weeks. In the next 4 weeks, we then go into the build phase, okay? So we've optimized our time as best possible. And let's just say if you can actually you might be able to do one of these zone 2 rides, you might be able to make an hour and a half. You might be able to make it 2 hours, 3 hours, certainly as the weather starts to improve and we get, further into spring, okay? But that is really the next phase, if you like. If you can just do 4 weeks of this, that's where the build phase come in. And the only difference we will do in the build phase is you will continue to do the VO2 max and threshold. You might add an extra VO2 max interval into your sessions, or you might add an extra threshold interval into the sessions that you're doing to build those. But when I refer to the build phase at step 3, that's really just trying to take at least one of these rides as your endurance ride. So many of my clients, they do this at the weekend, and you can incorporate it into a group, club or social ride if you want to. But I guess it's keeping these 2 the same. And the only difference will be is we will have times 1 45 to 60 minute zone 2, and we will then have the build ride, which is times 1, ideally the closest that we can get to 3 hours the better, okay? There may be some weekends where you can do 4, 5, 6 hours. Great. If you've got a 100-miler plan this year that you want to go and do, or you just want to go and ride 100 miles, then I advise you do that. But in terms of step 3, the build phase, keep your VO2 max, keep your threshold in. You might be able to, as I say, add a couple of extra intervals in because you've formed a really good foundation here. Keep doing your 1 zone 2 session a week that's 45 to 60 minutes, just if you're really stuck for time. But then at the weekend in the build phase, we really want to just start adding some volume in with that longer ride there. Okay? And if you follow these 3 steps now, and you haven't done much riding over the winter, you haven't done any riding over the winter, or you're just really coming last minute now, needing to get some fitness in. You may even have a really big sportive event, Gran Fondo, a trip to, the Alps, some of the islands coming up, and you've done really this year, you've just been caught out with your training. But this is going to fast track you really to get you to where you want to be. So step 1, just to recap, establish your FTP, do some baseline testing, because from there, when you're actually doing these VO2 max, threshold and zone 2 sessions, that means that they're going to be specific to where your fitnesses are now, and you're going to get gains a lot faster from doing so. Okay? Optimize the time that you have available. Follow that structure for 4 weeks, this one here, to get you going, getting back into it, so you're not really spiking your volume. Another mistake that I can see riders make is, the weather starts getting better and they start going out and trying to go from a training load, should we say, of maybe 2-3 hours a week, and they'll try and spike it to 10 to 15 hours and burn out really quickly. Okay, so this 4 weeks here is a really good quality 4 weeks just to build some foundations, and then you can move into that build phase. And once you've done this, and we're doing our 4 hours a week consistently with some intensity, we can then start to build up to 7, 8, 9, 10 hours and just gradually increase that in that second 4 week phase. And we're now, as I make this video, in second week of April. If you follow this, 8 weeks time, we're going to be talking, middle of June, end of June. You're starting the real summer months in great shape, would have made some really good progress. Just one other thing, little bonus of what you can do at the end of this 4 weeks here, if you want to, just to really ensure that this second 4 week build phase is as accurate as it needs to be, is at the end of 4 weeks, you could do a second FTP test, either a 20-minute or ramp test, just to make sure that when you go into the second 4 weeks, because you're going to make some gains here, you're going to get fitter, certainly if you haven't done this, that you need to then just adjust those training zones so that then the second 4 week block is as accurate as it needs to be, so that you can then springboard off of that again going into the summer. I hope you found that useful. If you've been stuck this winter, I really hope that is going to help you. It will help you definitely if you follow it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. As I say, I make these videos. If I can fast track you to your goals, then I've done my job by doing so. If you found it useful, please drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Go back to some of the other videos as what I've discussed here, certain sections of it, certainly around the sessions. You will find me break those down in a bit more detail. And a really good one as well is the training zones just around Strava, how to use that to establish exactly what your training zones are. Keep up the great work. Fuel smart, ride strong. Speak to you soon.